So I'd like to say good morning, good early morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in Europe and Africa. Good evening to our friends in Southeast Asia and Australia. Hope you're all well. And I believe we have some Dhamma questions.
Good evening, Ajahn. Yes, we do have. Question number 1, Namaste, Ajahn. Could you please guide us in step-by-step manner on how to practice vipassana? Metta Chittena. Thank you.
So Ajahn is taking a deep in-breath. That's quite the question. Bring it up again, JC. Please guide us in a step-by-step manner on how to practice vipassana, metta cittena. So you get to ask 14-word question, and now the Ajahn has to wrap his brain around it and talk for the next half an hour. So anyway, that's part of the job, isn't it? So vipassana means insight. And it's not, vipassana isn't a small insight. It's vipassana insight is, let's say, penetrative insight, sometimes referred to as insight knowledges. What is an insight knowledge? To count as true insight, genuine insight. So it will have to be seeing anicca, impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and anatta in a very deep way. So some people and some traditions suggest that we can practice vipassana meditation as a method. And in my experience, the way I understand it, I don't really see vipassana as a method. Meditation methods serve several functions. They serve the function of helping us to generate mindfulness, and generating mindfulness produces more clarity. That clarity should help us to see things in accordance with their deeper, truer nature, and that's when insight into the deeper truth becomes possible. There are ways to use reflective meditation that increase the likelihood of having insight. So we have to start with the basic understanding that the mind is affected by greed, by hatred, and by delusion, the 3 root kilesas. So we all start with that. Even Lord Buddha, when he was a bodhisattva, he had to start with that. That's what we start with. Greed, hatred, and delusion exist in the mind because of ignorance. So the biggest problem is actually the ignorance. Ignorance as to the true nature of phenomenon, true nature of body and mind. So what is ignorance? Ignorance means not knowing. Because we don't know, we misapprehend. That's delusion. We see things incorrectly because there is dust in our eyes, as it were. There is something in our mind that obstructs clear seeing. This is the power of ignorance and the power of delusion. An arahant, someone who has uprooted the kilesas, uprooted greed, hatred, and delusion, who sees clearly all the time. It's not possible for them to have a greedy or a hateful emotion, because that has to be a self. So it's a self that wants pleasure and doesn't want pain. The self is a symptom of ignorance and delusion. It's the result of ignorance and delusion. The vipassana, direct, penetrative insight into the true nature of the body and the mind, the true nature of all conditions in oneself and externally, as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. That insight uproots the ignorance. It's the antidote. So the antidote to not knowing is insight knowledge, knowing correctly. So contemplating impermanence as a meditation, like you set the intention, sometimes it's a very good thing to do. One sets the intention to notice the cessation of the out-breath, to notice the changing of feelings, to notice the arising and cessation of a thought. This is a contemplation. Set the intention to train the mindfulness to notice arising, staying for some time, and ceasing, or changing. So we should all do that sometimes. This ripens the mind to have insight. But in my understanding, well, I'll talk about this first. There is a list of 16 vipassana insights composed apparently by an arahant by the name of Upatissa and recorded in the Vimutti Magga. So there is a list of 16 vipassana insights that this arahant bhikkhu described. Very interestingly, when I read an introduction, there was a quote when I was doing a bit of research today to prepare this reflection. There was a quote by Mahasi Sayadaw that said, it's actually better if meditators don't see this list, hear this list, or read this list. Because one of the big obstructions in practice is desire mind, and another obstruction is overestimation, and another obstruction is thinking you've understood properly when you may not have. And so having a list to refer to can be helpful for some people and can be harmful to some people. And this is one of the challenges of trying to teach people, and one of the challenges of in practice. But one of the things that I have great faith in is that meditating a lot, maintaining mindfulness in all postures, then insight knowledge is what occurs. That's where this practice goes. So one of my favorite brief teachings, and I mention it often, is that after Lord Buddha was enlightened under the Bodhi tree, and he spent 7 weeks experiencing the bliss of liberation, and after abiding in Nibbana, he would come out of that week, and then he would have a very pithy contemplation. And he was in awe and amazed with the result of his own practice after all those eons and kalpas incalculable periods, he was finally liberated. And he had the insight, this is subtle, this is difficult for worldly beings to realize because it goes against the stream of samsara. It's beings are addicted to conceiving of a self. And in most theistic religions, you have a self, and then you have a big self in the sky, another self, an all-powerful creator. And it's only Buddhism and some Hindu schools that contemplate emptiness of self, seeing self as a delusion. But then he had the insight, these 4 foundations of mindfulness, when cultivated, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. It's a couple of sentences, and it's very profound. Another profound, pithy teaching that is one of my favorites is in the introduction to the Anapanasati Sutta, where Lord Buddha says, when breath meditation is cultivated, the 4 foundations of mindfulness are brought to fulfillment. In bringing the 4 foundations of mindfulness to fulfillment, the 7 factors of enlightenment. I think I'll read it. I took a picture of it. I want to get my quote absolutely correct. So, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. When the 4 foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated, they fulfill the 7 enlightenment factors. When the 7 enlightenment factors are developed and cultivated, they fulfill true knowledge and deliverance. So here you have the process of enlightenment described in 1 paragraph. And Lord Buddha is pointing to the fact that breath meditation can do this if you take it as the vehicle. So this is very important because oftentimes we have no idea how precious and valuable breath meditation is. We don't yet fully grasp and appreciate what this seemingly simple practice can do if you really make it a vehicle for developing insight, concentration, and leading to liberation. But when you do your breath meditation, as we were just doing, you are sitting there with a body. And when you're aware of an in-breath and you're aware of an out-breath, you are aware of feelings that arise in relation to having a body. When you notice that there are thoughts, you're trying to be aware of your in and out breathing, and you notice that there are thoughts. So you are mindful of mind objects. You notice that there are emotions, cravings for this, desires, aversions, irritations, all sorts of feelings in the heart area associated with liking and disliking. Other feelings associated with different hindrances, dullness, restlessness, aversion, craving, doubt, worry. That all has a feeling component in the heart area. In trying to be aware of the breath in the area of the chest, for example, you do become mindful of mind objects. As your clarity from being consistent with your breath meditation develops further, there should be also a knowing of whether a mind object is wholesome or unwholesome. So we become familiar with the 5 hindrances. We become familiar, oh, there's sensual craving, oh, there's irritation, oh, there's dullness, oh, there's restlessness, oh, there's doubt. We become familiar with those things. That's mindfulness of Dhammas mindfulness of unwholesome dhammas. We be mindful of factors of jhana, for example. There is rapture, there is tranquility, there can be one-pointedness if we simply keep our attention, a mindful awareness on the meditation object consistently, long enough, frequently enough, then you are aware of wholesome dhammas. So breath meditation is an amazing thing. And Lord Buddha did describe it as the crown jewel of all the meditation objects. With regards when insight knowledges occur, in my experience, genuine insight knowledge occurs when you're putting forth a great deal of effort into your practice. So I do believe I have had some insight knowledges, and they occurred during winter retreat like situations. So that's a 3-month period. They have occurred in a 10-day retreat situation. So once the meditation starts to be 7, 8, 9 hours a day, that's when you can start to practice and develop vipassana correctly. So it's not that you don't have little insights throughout your daily practice, you do. But to have penetrative insight, which is actually getting in and destroying, beginning to uproot ignorance and delusion in a genuine way, in a powerful way, that insight knowledge is a powerful consequence of powerful practice. So I often talk about the 5 spiritual powers: faith and confidence in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, in the practices, in your ability, giving rise to energy. We apply that energy at being consistently mindful. Being consistently mindful, right collectedness or samadhi develops. When mindfulness, concentration, and wise reflection or wise discernment are working together, wisdom, that's when insight knowledges occur. So essentially what we need to aim for, the way I understand it, is enough practice that engenders a good, stable quality of presence of mind and clarity, some periods of collectedness, Khanika Samadhi, 5 minutes of peacefulness, Upajjhara Samadhi, 20 minutes of peacefulness, experiencing that frequently. And this is one of the most important things about practice, and other people don't quite recognize, is that probably one of the most important things is consistency. Because mindfulness is a subtle quality that builds over time if we are consistent in our practice. But because it's a subtle quality, it gets damaged if you allow the hindrances to take over the mind for too long. So if you kind of allow the kilesas to come up too much and you act them out too much, unskillful thoughts, unskillful speech, unskillful actions, when you come back to your meditation cushion, you will notice that there isn't much clarity and that there isn't much peace. And it's like you have to start all over again. Because allowing kilesa in the mind and acting it out, making karma with it, damages clarity. And so you end up with more darkness and more ignorance and more delusion in the mind. And the ignorance and the delusion, strong sense of self with powerful greed, powerful anger and hatred, that's not a good situation for clarity and collectedness. So one of the most important factors, it's not just having the correct meditation object and the correct understanding of how to apply the meditation object. It's doing it enough and consistently enough that those factors of the eightfold path, right mindfulness, right concentration, or those 5 powers, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, start to get powerful in the mind and work together. So Tanajan Anan describes the eightfold path, the Dharma wheel. It's not a list outside. It's not a picture of a wheel. It's qualities that are working in the mind. So that Dharma wheel has to be spinning in your mind if that Dharma wheel is spinning in your mind, it is destroying greed, hatred, and delusion, slowly but surely. If the Dharma wheel is not spinning in your mind, not keeping the precepts strictly, not doing your daily practice, falling into negativity, then the kilesas and the hindrances are destroying the Dhamma wheel. So it's a bit of a holy war going on in there. And to get the results Lord Buddha is talking about, fulfilling the 4 foundations of mindfulness, bringing to fruition the 7 factors of enlightenment, all that is required is to practice a couple of times a day, consistently, without stopping, and then taking periods of retreat. And what will occur is you will start to have deep insights into the true nature of the body and the mind. So many people, I've translated in the past questions for Ajahn Anan about various meditation methods, and I've heard him say, well, people want to know what meditation method is the right one for my character. And Ajahn Anan basically says, well, the one that you like, whichever one you feel is right. He said, but it's not so much the method, it's the consistency of the mindfulness. So whichever method that you can do that helps to generate a quality of mindfulness and being consistent with it, that's the issue. You need to use your meditation object to generate a good quality of clarity. You have to have the intention to bring that clarity into your daily life in all postures. And you need to do it enough that it gets powerful. But whenever I've had what I would consider to be an insight knowledge, I was never aware in the moment before that it was about to happen. And I was never there with an agenda like I'm going to have an insight knowledge or I am practicing vipassana. But in every single instance, I was always meditating a lot. And what happens, in my experience, is that if you meditate a lot, it grinds down the self-view with its agenda. It grinds down in a wholesome way. When I say that phrase, I think the phrase grind down is correct, but you don't grind it down with any kind of ill will or hatred or aversion. It's like enough good, consistent quality of mindfulness. It's what happens is the meditation object begins to become so established in the mind, and the clarity that arises due to the meditation object becomes the mind's object. And then the self-view, which is something which is a mental construct, but the result of ignorance and delusion, the self-view starts to fall away for moments because you're not feeding it, you're not building it up. So this self-view that we have, conceiving of self and others, is something that we do. And we're not mindful that we do it because it's automatic. We've been doing it for so long. But what happens if you start to meditate once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, and then you have periods of retreat? The meditation object for periods of time becomes the main object, and there's no sense of self when the meditation object is genuinely established. Sense of self falls away. And then also, that's it, like for using samadhi. And then when the mindfulness and wisdom is strong in the mind doesn't conceive or create a self. It's aware of a body as a body. It's aware of feelings as feelings. So that's vipassana. That's vipassana insight, when you start to experience your body and your mind. So you could be sitting there in meditation, very aware of a body, very aware of the breath, not have any thoughts, and not be perceiving it as a self. That's the kind of thing that vipassana is. But to sit on the pillow with a self-view who's determined to have insight knowledges, you're in trouble, because there's already a self there with an agenda. And it just doesn't work that way. But the good news is we have the method. Lord Buddha has explained very clearly. Breath meditation, when taken as a vehicle, when cultivated consistently, fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So what does that mean? It means you will become aware of a body, as thoughts as thoughts, mind objects as mind objects, feelings as feelings, dhammas as dhammas, just by doing it, because all of these things are occurring in your body, in that space that your body is in, your body and your mind. So breath meditation is like an anchor in a sea, an eye in a storm. And if we just trust it, and we do it a lot, you will begin to have insights into not self. And as sati, samadhi, and panya work together, you will begin to glimpse, those insights weaken the thickness of the delusion, the veil of the delusion. And as that veil of delusion gets thinner and thinner in the mind, then the mind will pierce through the veil and begin to glimpse nibbana. Then you have insight into the ultimate nature of a liberated mind, the fact that a mind has the potential to be liberated. So people can have what is called temporary liberations. They experience the nibbana element, the deathless, the unconditioned. So mindfulness is one of the conditions, probably the main condition, obviously on a foundation of dana and sila and consistent practice. Mindfulness is the condition that leads us to have glimpses of the unconditioned, glimpses of and experiences of the unconditioned uproot and destroy our deluded attachment to conditions, to seeing them as a self. Just come to see a body as a body, feelings as feelings, thoughts as thoughts, not I, not mine. So the correct way to cultivate vipassana is to develop a lot of mindfulness. And a good way to develop mindfulness is to be consistent with your breath meditation. We also have to, because we all have greed and we all have hatred, we also need to do some metta, because it weakens the hateful, angry tendency, and we have to do some contemplation of bodies and real nature of these things to weaken our greed as well. But when you think of Luang Por Chah's training, the way Ajahn Chah trained his monks, he didn't talk about the 16 vipassana insights. He did require that his monks went to the morning chanting and the morning meditation. He did require that the monks swept the leaves at the right time. He did require that the monks went on arms around. He did require that the monks did their chores. He required that the monks meditated alone at their kutis, and he required that they come out again and chant and meditate. So you look at the training that he made the monks commit to: practice alone with no talking, practice in a group, so you have to deal with some impingement, working together harmoniously. So it's a situation where you have to develop mindfulness, sila, selfless service. It's kind of grinding down selfishness, forcing people to be more wakeful than they would normally be. I mean, who wants to get up at 2:45 in the morning? But at Wat Nong Papong Ajahn Chah's monastery, everybody had to. So things that he did, like you have to get up early, that's going against the hindrance of dullness and sloth and torpor. He's forcing his monks to be wakeful from 2:45. And then you can't be lazy. You have to come out and sweep leaves. Everybody has to come out and help work. There were periods of time where he would make the monks do more work. There's periods of time where they could have quiet periods of time where he just told them to lock up the books. The rainy season was a period of time where he wouldn't let them do any study. For this reason that I was mentioning, like Mahasi Sayadaw says, sometimes grasping with desire or thinking that you understand can be an obstruction. But what he did require is that monks meditated a lot in every posture and had to have time alone and had to have time in community, had to do some service, had to do some things that they didn't want to do, so that they could had to practice letting go of irritation and aversion. They had to practice generating energy and effort when they didn't want to. keeping in mind that he forced them to do an all-night sit or all-night practice once a week. So this is the kind of thing that ripens the mind for insight. So you look at what Luang Por Chah did. Get up early in the morning, practice extra for all night, once a week. I think it was easier when they had an arahant spreading metta to them. It's easier to practice all night when you're living with Ajahn Chah than it is in your suburban home. But the point is, it was a lifestyle that caused people to have insight and caused samadhi to develop and caused wisdom to arise, because Luang Por Chah himself was also giving Dhamma reflections. So they're hearing Dhamma, they're chanting Dhamma, and they're doing quiet practice alone, they're doing practice in community, they're doing service in community. So they have to practice with impingement. They're bringing a quality of clarity and discernment, mindfulness and clear comprehension to their contacts with other people. But they weren't encouraged to go and talk at each other's kutis. When they went back to their kuti, they were alone. So it was a lifestyle that made the arising of insight very, very likely. And so Ajahn Chah's training did produce several arahants, as far as according to my faith. And I believe I know some of them. That's my good fortune. Some of you have met them too. So I just wanted to offer those reflections. If you want to read the 16 Vipassana insights, you can search for it on Buddha.net. Just do a search, 16 Vipassana insights. There are things there like, I'll read a couple of them, just to give you a bit of a sense. The kind of thing that you experience. Knowledge of the distinction between mind and body. So the mindfulness and wisdom sees a body as a body, but it is also aware that that which is aware of it is not the body. Knowledge of arising and passing away. So that's clearly seeing it arising, passing away, arising, passing away. And when you see arising and passing away clearly, it's not a self. Sense of self will tend to fall away. Seeing impermanence. A sense of self is based on an assumption of permanence. Knowledge of dissolution. And then there is knowledge of disenchantment. When we chant the fire sermon or the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the last paragraph in both of those goes something like, with the arising of weariness, nibbida, the mind becomes dispassionate, viraga, and through dispassion, the mind is liberated. So the passions fade. So these kind of development of a bit of weariness, or a lot of weariness, but weariness as a wholesome quality. Disenchantment, I prefer the phrase disenchantment, not fascinated with. And then eventually it's knowledge of liberation. The mind knows it's liberated. So it's a tricky subject to talk about, and I hope that something that I said was helpful to you. And I wish you every success in developing enough mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom working together as path factors to have clear insight into the nature of the body and mind that will weaken the veil of ignorance and delusion and ripen your mind to have direct penetrative experience of liberation. So I offer that for your reflection.
Question number 2. Venerable Ajahn Chalu, I have been chanting and doing sitting meditation quite regularly now, more regular at night than in the morning. It is usually in my bedroom as the altar in the living room is not convenient, normally about half an hour to 1.5 hours. Previously, before I started chanting regularly, I seldom have dreams, good or bad, when I sleep. Now I have bad dreams almost every night. Most of the time, I roughly remember what they were. It's a long question, second page. I tried to chant Buddha or Om Mani Padme Hum lying in the bed before sleeping, but it doesn't help to stop having bad dreams. I hope Venerable Ajahn can advise what I might have done wrong, or what can I do to stop these bad dreams. With gratitude, thank you, Ajahn. And Ajahn, there one more page. These bad dreams with me in them. I feel it is me, although I don't see my face. And I would have heightened feelings of fear, anxiety. Example, walking through dark, lonely lanes or stairs towards a bus stop or a car park which doesn't seem to appear. I'm afraid of roaches. One night I dreamt I was surrounded by lots of flying and crawling baby roaches. One flew into my hair. It is mostly just me by myself. There are no devils of such frightening beings in my dreams, thankfully. In this dream, there's no physical harm to me, but the feelings of anxiety and fear felt so real.
So I would say that this person was having dreams before, but wasn't aware of them. So meditating regularly and meditating before sleep, then being aware of the dreams, actually suggests an increase in the quality of awareness, which, sati is sometimes, mindfulness is sometimes referred to as right recollection. So, and then having a dream, you know that you're having a dream. There's a part of the mind which is aware of that mental proliferation. And then when you wake up, you remember it. If there isn't any presence of mind or clarity of mind, you had all sorts of dreams, you weren't really aware while you were dreaming, and you woke up and you can't remember them. So in terms of the development of mindfulness, it's probably growth. It's interesting, the dream that this person is having is feeling lonely, being alone in a dark situation, trying to get to a bus stop or to a car park and not getting there. So I think this just seems to suggest a lot of what's going on now. So people are being required to stay at home, isolate from friends, where there has been freedom of movement for a long time. And, people aren't allowed to travel, or travel is much less frequent. So that sense of being a bit alone, and I would say it is a dark time for the world now, not everywhere, but in general, if you compare it to last year, 2020 is a difficult year. So in a way, the dream just seems to be making a comment about what the person's experiencing probably in their daily life is simply flowing on into the evening as well. So a sense of more isolation, a sense of not having freedom of movement, a sense of darkness. When I visited Ajahn Anan recently, he did say that the world is going through a kind of a group karma. We have individual karma, but we also have group karma. Having been born in this world at this time, we have a shared karma. So it's a dark time that the world is going through. When you think of the millions of bankruptcies, when you think of the increases of domestic abuse, when you think of the suicides, the addiction, it's a very difficult time for a great many people. Starvation in poorer countries where people can't work and they're day wage earners and they're forced to stay home. So it's a difficult time for the world. So I would say having some dreams about darkness, isolation, alienation, and of having your opportunities to travel curtailed, it's just the mind being aware of a karma that we're having to work through. So, like I said, it's not for everybody. Here in rural Thailand, life hasn't changed much. In fact, Khao Kor, the area where I live, is going through a bit of a boom because all of the Thais who used to go to Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, Malaysia to go shopping, the upper middle class who had some money, they are traveling within Thailand. And this area has a lot of resorts. And so most of the resorts are full. it made it onto the news that there were traffic jams in Kalkor, made it onto the evening news. And it was a good harvest for the farmers. Life is pretty much the same in rural Thailand for a lot of people. And but in Bangkok, many businesses, and in the regional city centers, many businesses are struggling. Obviously, anything related to foreign tourism is really struggling. Areas like Phuket, Koh Samui, Pattaya, Chiang Mai, they have a difficult time. So we're going through a difficult time in the world, and it's part of our shared karma. But I am happy to tell you that there is one paritta which is short, one chant recommended by Lord Buddha, that he says if you recite it, you will not have bad dreams. So if you don't want to have bad dreams, you can chant the Abhaya Paritta. Abhaya means fearless. So the fearless protection. It's not many words. Yandunnimittam, avamangalanca, camanapo, sakunassa, saddo, Papaggaho, dussupinam, akantam, Buddhanubhavena, vunasamentu. And then the second time round, Dhammanubhavena, vunasamentu, Sanghanubhavena, vunasamentu. So Abhaya Paritta, chanted before sleeping, should help you to not have any bad dreams. But in general, we need to have metta for ourselves and for others in the world during this time. It's a difficult time. It's a dark time. So we don't want the darkness to infect or infest our minds. We want to be a being. We do have the capacity to generate brightness and lightness and clarity. So ideally, there's more darkness around us. We apply more effort, get more determined, and we could take, in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about taking challenges as the path with unshakable optimism. So you can take a difficult and challenging situation and use it to develop more insight, more determination, more loving kindness, more patience, more clarity, especially if you have more time. So the darkness around us is not something we have to be subsumed by. The darkness can be something that we radiate into, but it does require determination and confidence. Don't let the mind fall to dejection. Be determined to practice more. Now you know how bad samsara can be. And believe me, it gets much worse than this. You want to get serious about your metta cultivation, your Buddhanusati, your generating, and also not being contentious. This is part of our karma. At the same time, if I was a lay person, not a monk, I might come out and protest if my liberties, if too many of my liberties were being taken from me for too long. I might object to that. But since I am a monk, living in a place where my freedoms are not being oppressed too much, I don't have to do that. You know, you can respond skillfully according to your understanding. Even if a person goes to a protest, you don't have to be angry. You can just say, I want my freedom back, please. So whether you protest or not, that's your choice. But I wish everybody great liberty and freedom. I was hoping to take a group of people to Sri Lanka during this period of time for a retreat in the Anuradhapura area. That didn't happen. And when I look at my lifestyle past years, taking people on pilgrimages has been a really fun and energizing and engaging, wonderful thing that we've been able to do. Many people, many occasions. It's been a big part of my life. So that's not happening now. But I am doing Zoom teachings and I'm building a new Abbott's Kuti. So you get different opportunities in life. And I never thought I would enjoy bricklaying, but I quite do enjoy bricklaying. Part of it is the weather is nice just now. So Nice weather here. Tomorrow I have to give a teaching to 100+ missionary monks who are coming to have a bit of a retreat in this area. It's very interesting. I think I mentioned about my PR visa I have to show that I'm worthy of being allowed to stay in the Royal Kingdom, Thailand. And one of the weak parts of my application was that because I tried to avoid becoming busy and becoming famous in Thailand equals becoming busy. And I'd consciously avoided that for more than a decade. But with my PR application, I have to show that I'm benefiting Buddhism in Thailand, other than just being a nice and good monk. So out of the blue, I got this invitation from the dean of the monastic university in Bangkok to please come and be their insight meditation master who teaches the missionary monks, 100 more missionary monks at this conference, which is happening in the area where I live. And I was like, this is amazing, because when I look at this letter, I'm not saying I'm an insight meditation master, but the letter says I am. And I'm looking at this letter, I'm like, oh, that's a genuinely impressive looking letter, and that's very timely. So we will be putting that letter as an addendum to my visa application. And it does look very good that the dean of the Mahachulalongkorn Monastic University has invited Ajahn Achso to give a 2-hour teaching to the missionary monks of Thailand. And I also have another invitation in 2 days to teach in Bangkok at the International Tripitaka Recitation. So normally that occurs in Bodh Gaya, but it's not happening there this year. So they're doing it. They built a replica of the Mahabodhi stupa in Bangkok, and they've invited me to teach. And I actually said no. 2 weeks ago, I said no. I'm still quite trying to be committed to this idea of not becoming too well known, because I like my simple monastery and my simple life. And then I was meditating the other night, and I had this strong feeling, no, you're supposed to go. You need to pick this one up, because this is a period of time where you have to show that you are of benefit to the Buddhists of Thailand and to Buddhism in Thailand. So another impressive looking letter from a very serious monk, please come and give a teaching at the International Tripitaka Recitation. So I still have movement and liberty and some fun things. Actually, I don't know if it's going to be fun. I don't really like these big gigs, but I always feel happy to have done it afterwards. But I don't enjoy. You guys think it's fun to have 100 or 200 people all staring at you, listening to every word, wanting to know, does he really understand what he's talking about? It's like, probably rather lay bricks. But I do like helping people. And I do like sharing the knowledge that has been shared with me. So I usually feel good afterwards. But anyway, I'm rambling on a bit, and then there may be another question. Was there another question, JC?
Yes, Ajahn.
Just sharing with you a little bit what's happening in my life.
Saddo to those 100 over missionary monks. And the Tripitaka, I think, Rajan, they will be broadcasting like last year, live.
I think there will be, and if I find out that information, I'll share it. If it's going to be live streamed. So.
Thank you so much.
It is English. They've asked me to teach in English, and it'll be translated in Thai. So, just nice anyway. 2 times ago, it was translated into Hindi and Bengali, and last time it was translated into Hindi and Vietnamese. So this time it will be translated into Thai. So.
Ajahn, we have question number 3. Hello,
Yes.
Ajahn. I have been trying your guided Kwan Yin meditation. I have not previously done much of either visualization or focused metta practices, just as a tag on to anapanasati. When I do the Kwan Yin meditation, I feel more sadness and loneliness, or perhaps more in touch with those emotions. Is this because my primary reference point for relating to metta is based on experiences of sensuous becoming, example romantic and familial, and because my foundation of subtle body, breath awareness is not strong enough for metta practice? Thank you.
So I don't know if this person's metta practice is based on sensuality and familial. I don't know. But I think in doing a practice which has a focus on compassion, it's going to bring us into our heart. And it may be the case, in fact, it probably is the case, is that there is some sadness in there. You know, this human experience is full of challenges and disappointments. And we don't just have the challenges and disappointments in our own life. We are surrounded by other people who have challenges, frustrations, disappointments, association with the liked, separation from the loved. Samsara is painful. And so practices which bring us more in the heart, we may find that there are some emotions that we've been possibly trying to avoid. And when we really come into that heart center, we see that there's some sadness. I don't see this as a bad thing, because I think sadness is something that is informing us about the nature of samsara. So we need to make our sadness into a kind of a spiritual sadness. Spiritual sadness will ripen as a sense of urgency. Spiritual sadness, sometimes referred to as in Thai, sulot samvega, sulot jai. So it's recognized as a spiritual emotion. So when you really start to see the characteristic of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, this whole experience of association with the liked, separation from the liked, this aging, sickness and death that's all around us all the time, if we pay attention, well, then we see that samsara is sad. So if you come to meditate and you find that there's sadness in the heart, it may be that the mind is recognizing, the beginning of recognizing the truth of dukkha. But we have to take that experience and cultivate an inner refuge of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So what I would do if I was that meditator and I came to meditate and I noticed sadness and pain in my heart, is that I would try to offer it love. And so you open the heart to that experience with kindness and compassion, and you give it the space that it needs, and it will arise, stay for some time, and pass away. And if you are diligent with your metta practice, you will fill the heart space with loving kindness. This is replacement by opposites. But sometimes we need to feel a certain amount of sadness, because that sadness is informing us about the truth. And we allow the mind to be informed by that. And then we get on with cultivating the path which leads to the cessation of suffering. Loving kindness, mindfulness, breathing. Find spaces that open up in the mind of coolness, clarity, peace. Make an island unto yourself. Find a refuge inside yourself. So seeing dukkha is important. Feeling sad is normal as a response to that. And then we have to cultivate the path and have what Ajahn Nun refers to as temporary liberation. So you get breaks from samsara through some samatha, through good mindfulness and contemplation, mindfulness, concentration, mindfulness with clear comprehension, being able to let go of unskillful reactions when those qualities get powerful enough. But yeah, so there's a lot of challenging things going on in the world. So sometimes we pick up sadness around us. We see all sorts of sad things on the news. We hear all sorts of sad things. So yeah, I think these practices that bring us into the heart, sometimes there's sadness in the heart. And we can be energetic about then cultivating loving kindness or cultivating true compassion. True compassion doesn't have distress. So distress is the near enemy of compassion. If you really, really open your heart with compassion, may I be well, may I be free from suffering, may I be free from suffering. Once that energy of compassion really gets flowing in the mind and pumping in the mind, it should fill the mind and just flow out in response to distress. But it shouldn't. It should be aware of the distress, but you shouldn't be feeling distressed. You're aware of pain, you're aware of suffering, you're responding with compassion, pure compassion, loving this, blasting this cool, calm, divine emotion in response to distress. That emotion, when it gets powerful enough as a Brahma Vihara, should replace the emotion of sadness. But it does require determined, consistent, energetic effort. And that's the kind of response you can get. Sometimes we have to start with accepting it, the sadness in the heart, allowing it some space, then responding to it with kindness, allowing it to fall away in its own time. It's all pretty normal stuff for meditators to have to deal with this, some of that in our minds. Wishing you all well. Please take care of your minds.
And we also wish you a happy brick layering.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Take
Bye,
care,
Ajahn.
Ajahn. Good night.
Cup.
See you.
Thank you, Ajahn.
See you soon. Back